Welcome to the Brew Crew Review Podcast, the show by fans for fans of your Milwaukee Brewers.
All right, Brewer fans, welcome to the Brew Crew Review Podcast. Today, this is Craig and Vince coming at you. Welcome, Brewer fans. How are you doing, Vince?
I'm doing great, Craig. How's it going with you?
It's great. Glad to welcome you back to this to the Western Hemisphere. I know you're overseas, so welcome back. I'm glad you made it back safely. As while you were gone, the Brewers did absolutely nothing. But just as of yesterday, big news, and I think a little bit shocked all of us. The Brewers signed their first big free agent signing, I guess you could call it, by signing former Phillies first baseman Rhys Hoskins to a 2-year, $34 million deal. It does have an opt-out after the first season. I assume if he's healthy, he'll probably exercise that. But if he is healthy and productive, that means he's going to be a great contributor to the 2024 Milwaukee Brewers team. So, what are your thoughts on the signing?
I mean, I was really excited about it. I know that we talked a little bit before our show here in our pre-production meeting, and I'm really pumped. When you look at Hoskins' numbers, going back to, I guess, his last healthy season in 2022, but certainly before that, he's a consistent contributor. He's got power. He has gap power. He smashes lefties. I really like a lot of things about Hoskins, and he was definitely on the short list of guys that we had talked about, Craig, on one of our previous episodes earlier this offseason as guys that the Brewers should target. So, yeah, he was definitely on that list. I had talked about him if we were going to go the free agency route and getting a guy like Pete Alonso if we were going to go via trade. So, no, I'm really pumped about this move. I think the Brewers' offense is a lot better today than it was yesterday, here 24 hours ago prior to this signing. So, yeah, absolutely thrilled about the move. Kudos to the organization for making it. I'm glad that we're not retreating from, trying to be competitive this year. I think that the contract is reasonable. 2 years, $34 million. I think that's about in the ballpark for what a guy like Hoskins is worth. So I'm glad to see that the organization is making moves to make us still remain competitive and even improve our position going into 2024. I think that the Brewers are a better team today by a long shot after this signing.
Yeah, I agree with much of that. Was surprised by it because I know that the rumors recently were that we're most likely looking at the likes of Garrett Cooper and possibly even bringing back Carlos Santana. Again, not horrifically bad options, but Rhys Hoskins is a couple of levels, in my opinion, up from them offensively. He's a 30-homer power bat, which I think we desperately needed, especially from the right side. He kills lefties. He's got some great postseason experience. Just 2 seasons ago on the Phillies, he was unfortunately injured last year, but two seasons ago on the Phillies, I think he had 6 postseason home runs and was a key reason why they went all the way to the World Series that year. They did lose, but yeah, I mean, he's got that great experience. He's a great clubhouse guy. And he's one of these, in my opinion, the biggest factor. I mean, I've heard that he's a great clubhouse guy, but just seeing, I got the feeling that he's like one of these alpha male type guys that are there to fire up the clubhouse or whatever. And even though we love the Christian Yelic's of the world, he doesn't necessarily have that same personality. He's more of like laid back, at least, and we don't really know what he's like behind the scenes, but I really think Rhys Hoskins is going to be a huge difference on the team overall. Very similar to Willie Adames when he came, and especially to the younger guys. I mean, Rhys Hoskins is only 30 years old himself, but especially to the younger guys, we have a lot of young outfielders, and obviously Jackson Trio is going to make his major league debut this year, much anticipated. And we've got Sal Frelick, Garrett Mitchell, Bryce Frank, all young hitters, and Joey Weimer, all definitely young hitters that are going to be a big part of the 2024 Brewers. I think bringing a veteran like that, and again, at 30 years old, he's just still at the far end of his prime. So I think he can come up with a great season. I think in something like, I think I read that in he's got like 5 career home runs at Miller Park in less than like 10 games or something like that. So, an AmFam Field, his AmFam Field history. So apparently he likes hitting there as well. So there's a lot of good positives toward this. Yeah, I guess the other thing I'll point out is sometimes injuries. I really feel that if he was not injured last season for the Phillies, and he probably would not be a Milwaukee Brewer right now. He probably would have commanded as a free agent at least like a 5-year deal, I'm guessing, and the Brewers would have probably been sitting on the sidelines for that. So this is one of those things where he seems just like a perfect match because, as we know, our ownership's not really keen in handing out 4, 5, 6-year contracts necessarily to free agents necessarily. Obviously, they did to Christian Yelich and then some, and also to Jackson Trio. But if you're not a franchise type player, they don't deem you as such. I don't think they're willing to just dole out those kind of contracts. And so we're always looking for the bargains, it seems. And even though Rhys Hoskins is going to make 6 or 17 million a year, which is significant, it's on a short-term deal, which I think was very, very attractive to Milwaukee Brewers ownership. If you, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure that's true. And, we should point out that Hoskins didn't play his way out of Philadelphia by any stretch. He got injured, and they have a lot of good hitters, and they had to slide Bryce Harper somewhere, and Bryce Harper is now the first baseman in Philadelphia. So you're talking about literally a cornerstone for their franchise. So it wasn't like Hoskins was, outgunned or overshadowed by anybody in Philadelphia. It was just kind of bad luck and good timing for the Brewers, in my opinion. We also, I am getting a note here, Craig, from our intern, just looking at some of the numbers for Hoskins in Milwaukee. He has a 342, 405, 790 slash line with 5 home runs and 8 RBIs in 9 games at AmFam Field. So pretty impressive. And thanks to Scotty's intern, Scarlett, for passing along this note here. But that's some pretty impressive hitting already for Hoskins at Miller Park. Hopefully that continues.
And of course, beware of the small sample size in that, but that's still pretty exciting. And again, this is a guy that even as a power hitter, he obviously strikes out a lot. He's probably only going to hit about 250, but just a couple of seasons ago in 2009, he walked 116 times, which I believe would be a Brewers franchise record, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
I think Prince might own the current record, just over 100 or so. And again, I'm just going off memory. I'm sure if you could put Scott's interns on that, since Scott himself is pretty.
Yeah, is Scotty on, by the way? Is Scott or Chad on the show here today? I thought they were coming on.
No, they're probably busy doing other things, I assume. No, I mean, this is the type of signing. I mean, if you really look at it, Prince Fielder was last season as Milwaukee Brewers 2011. And since then, there's been a dozen seasons, and we've been just cycling through the bargain bin when it comes to corner infielder, especially first baseman. And I could list them all off, but I think we've done that in a previous Brook Review podcast, and we don't need to go down that road again. Yeah. But I mean, some of them are very likable, don't get me wrong, but he's been the most talented person that we've signed to play first base since Prince Fielder. So that's in and of itself is very exciting. I think if he's healthy, you can pretty much mark him down for 30 plus home runs. And that's what I think we sorely need in this lineup. So basically, it's to sign a free agent on a 2-year, really probably 1-year contract and pencil him immediately in your number 4 spot in your lineup is pretty exciting. And I think he really balances out the lineup well, obviously with Yelich and Frelick and Mitchell and all left-handers and Terang as well. I think it's definitely a good thing that a right-handed power hitting back is exactly what the doctor ordered, and very exciting. And again, if you guys want to look up on YouTube the footage that he had a huge monstrous home run against Spencer Strider in the NLCS a couple of seasons ago.
Yeah,
where he did like an
my brother was at that game.
Spike.
My brother Joe was at that game, Craig. That was pretty awesome. He said,
really
pretty magical moment. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's cool. In Philadelphia, right? Yeah. So
yeah, I was in Philadelphia. Yeah, he was out there for some military training nearby, and that was an off day for him. So he went out to the game by himself and had a great time, and was actually at that game. I was watching on TV, and he was there in person.
Yeah, and again, when the offseason started, Rhys Hoskins was a name that we definitely had our eye on as Burr fans, but for some reason I just felt like it was a little bit of a mini pipe dream just because we hadn't signed someone of his caliber. And even though with the injury, I was sure he wasn't going to get a long-term contract, so I thought because of that, we could be candidates. But I really thought that he'd be attractive to other teams. So that's the very same reason they're more willing to open up their checkbook when it's time to add a big power bat. And I'm almost a little bit shocked. In fact, there were some rumors that he would be a good fit for the Chicago Cubs. So the fact that we were able to sign him and that they did not is pretty exciting, if you ask me. So.
Yeah, me too. This kind of reminds me a little bit going back to 2012, the Aramis Ramirez signing. Getting a power bat, an established guy to play at a corner position. To me, that's kind of the most applicable, previous example of the Brewers doing something like this. So yeah, it's pretty exciting, and that actually stabilized third base for a number of years. I know that we've got Hoskins for either 1 or 2 years as the deal is currently constituted, but hopefully we can play well this year, and who knows what'll happen in the future. Maybe we will extend him at some point, and if nothing else, we've got a great first baseman for 2024.
Yeah, and it's always one of those things where when you sign someone on a short-term deal like that, he really takes a liking to the clubhouse, to the city, to whatever, and vice versa. The ownership could take a great liking to him, and we could open up, give him what he wants, free agency going forward. So again, I always like bringing in, and the Brewers rarely are, and have the opportunity to do such thing, to bring in someone that they could possibly sign to a longer-term deal, just to kind of get them in-house, so to speak. I know that really good franchises like the New York Yankees do that all the time. In fact, I think that's what they probably did this year with Juan Soto by acquiring him. And
Cardinals have done that a number of times too, and it's also led to the Cardinals signing guys to long-term deals. I think that's what they did with Goldschmidt and Arenado both. If I recall correctly.
Exactly. It's a good strategy, and I'm not saying that's a strategy here necessarily, but I just like having some of his quality in for this year. And I think more than anything, and this has got to be exciting to Brewer fans, especially I would say you, Vince, is I think you had pointed out last year when I was disappointed that we weren't pushing all our cards in the middle of the table and really making a run for it when we had our big three aces still in place. We didn't know Woody would be injured at that time, of course. But your thoughts were that the Brewers could still go for it this year, not necessarily trade Burns or Adames or whatever during the offseason, and still kind of make one more push for a deep postseason run this year. And I was a little bit skeptical on that because, but apparently now, this signing, in my opinion, signals the fact that we're planning on kind of doing just that, or at least making an appearance of doing so going into the 2024 season. I think we're strong contenders to still win the NL Central. But it gives the organization an out, like if we're somehow not in contention in any way come All-Star break, that we could still flip these guys and then restock our farm system.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's to me,
worst case scenario, that was, I'm sorry to interrupt, Craig, but yeah, I totally agree. That was my approach. And I think that it's a wise one. Obviously, I'm biased because it's what I've been thinking for a while, but I do think that it does keep our options open. And if nothing else, the Brewers like to be flexible with their options. So I do think that this allows us to, go into 2024. We're excited as fans, clearly more excited today than we were yesterday prior to this signing. And I think that the Brewers are still the best team in the National League Central. I think that the Cubs have gotten worse by losing Stroman and by not re-signing Bellinger yet, and they still could. But I do think the Brewers are still the class of the division until proven otherwise. And, I like our chances for this year. And worst case scenario, if it doesn't go as expected, the Brewers still can trade Burns at the deadline. If he's not injured, we can still trade Hoskins if we had to at the deadline. We can still trade Adames at the deadline if we had to. So I think that, again, the financial outlay isn't such that we're burdened by a long-term contract. So there's a lot of reasons to really like the signing. And I'm very pumped at the way that this got done, and that the Brewers were creatively looking for options to be both good for 2024 and still not be impinged with a bad long-term contract if it were to go south, and if we were going to, go for a slightly modified rebuild following this season. So I do like it from a number of perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's one of the best free agents we've signed in quite some time. And so probably I'm going to say all the way back to Lorenzo Cain. I think he's pretty much the best free agent we've signed since that signing, in my opinion. So, yeah, it's
and without that long-term commitment either, Craig. I mean, I love Lorenzo Cain as much as anybody else, but by the end of that contract, that was a 5-year deal. And by the end of the contract, we were paying Cain not to play for us the second half of 2022, as Brewer fans might remember. And that was sort of expected at the front end of that deal. When we signed him, it was, we were expecting 3 good years, which is pretty much what we got with the aberration of the COVID year in 2020, unfortunately. But I do think that the good thing about this move is that the Brewers are not hamstrung necessarily by a long-term deal, and if it does blossom into something down the road, it still could. As you pointed out, Hoskins is only 30 years old, so there's a lot of upside, from a number of angles on this thing.
And we should point out that last year during spring training, Hoskins actually did, and it sucks, toward the end of spring training, actually did tear his ACL and his left knee. I myself have had ACL surgery on my right knee. I will say that I was never the same. No, I'm just kidding. That I think for a baseball player that plays
I forgot about that.
What's that?
I forgot that you did that. Weren't you like running out of a bar or something? I mean, and you twisted your knee or fell on the ice, or what was the story with that? I forgot. I'm sure our listeners
believe it or not, I was
in
actually in an indoor flag football league with one of my coworkers at the time out in Brookfield, actually. And I made a cut playing defense laterally, apparently on artificial turf, and my knee gave out. So but yeah,
God, dang, recovery. I thought it involved our sponsor Benno's in West Dallas, but okay, sorry, Craig.
I recovered from most of those injuries actually fairly quickly, but yeah, no, I do know that the risk, especially as a first baseman, is minimal here. I don't think the injury is going to hold him back. He should be fully recovered. I mean, by the time the year starts, the season starts, he'll be a full year since his ACL tear and surgery. So I think that he should be back to 100%. Obviously, there's some risk involved with the signing. I mean, he could have a down year and not even be, show that he's worth $17 million for next year, and therefore likely he won't opt out. But I think again, he could bounce back next year, even under contract. So I think it's almost a no-brainer of a contract signing for the Brewers. The fact that he was willing to sign with us, I think was more of an opportunity than anything else. And again, I think it's going to turn out to be a really good fit. And so I'm really excited about it. Like I haven't been this excited about the free agent signing probably since for like 5 years or more. So it's pretty cool. I guess
we were able to get a little bit of the background from our anonymous source, Tom Carter, Craig, if you want to get into some of that. I know that our anonymous source, Tom, mentioned that this kind of came together a little quickly. It was a lot of behind the scenes stuff. What did you hear from our anonymous source, Tom Carter?
We'll just say it's TC, if you could just go with that from now on. That way, in fact, we don't even have to. He said just go ahead and use the information. You don't have to say where he got it from, give him any type of credit whatsoever. In fact, he says, please stop doing that. So we should take that to heart, I guess, going forward. But no, I mean, Rhys, I think, is pretty excited to be a Milwaukee Brewer. I think that he feels that he's going to have a great season. He most likely would look to opt out if he does have a great season. But like I said, maybe it would lead to talks for a longer term contract with the team. And again, I think Mark Antonaccio is smart enough that if he's having a great year come August and we're still in playoff contention, why not pull him to the side and be like, hey, how about we give you an extension of like 3 or 4 years? Because in reality, if you look down our pipeline, we don't really have any other first base prospects on the way or anything like that. Most people speculate with all of our young outfielders if they do stay on the team, that most likely at some point Christian Yelich possibly would get moved to first base. In fact, he played for some first base for the Marlins early in his career even. But with that being said, I really think that he would be a great fit long term. Obviously, with the DH, there's more flexibility for getting guys bats in the lineup. And I do think that now the next question is, we really need to make this offense as best we can for this year. And I still feel like we have kind of a hole at third base. At this point, the speculation has been that maybe we'll give third base to kind of a soft platoon of Tyler Black and Andrew Monasterio. I feel like that could be upgraded in some fashion, but maybe that's the way we got to go now. What are your thoughts on what the Brewers should do for third base?
I'm actually all in for Tyler Black at this point, Craig. I know that there's been a lot of speculation about guys wanting to sign Matt Chapman. I am not as excited about a Chapman move. It's not that I dislike him. I just think that Tyler Black has got a huge upside. I'd like to see what he can do. So I don't want it to be a platoon situation either, to be honest. I want Monasterio to be a utility infielder. I think his value comes in playing multiple positions. He can sub in at short for Adames. He can sub in at second for Terang. Monasterio, I think, even played outfield for a few games last year. So I like that he's a utility guy, and Monasterio was an incredibly valuable part of the team last year. But I just don't think he's a starting third baseman. So I think that, again, you'll get the most value out of him as a utility guy. Give the starting third base job to Tyler Black. See what he can do with it. I am in favor, though, of signing some more infield depth. I think that you could probably sign a guy like Whit Merrifield on the cheap a little bit. Maybe even have Terang then be your backup second baseman and shortstop. And then if we do end up trading Willie, he's obviously the starting shortstop under that scenario. But, I think that it would just give you some flexibility, another bat that you can plug into the infield. So if I had my way, I would probably get Whit Merrifield as my next pickup rather than a distinct third baseman. And then I would let Tyler Black start.
Okay. Yeah, I do like the idea of Terang getting a full-time shot with his defensive prowess and his bat still in lap this year. I think that it's pretty clear that he's most likely our heir apparent at shortstop, but kind of under the assumption that we're not going to retain Willie Adames beyond this year. Not saying that that's not a possibility, but it just feels like that's the way that it's most likely going to play out. So with that being said, I'd like to see him get as many major league at bats this year if he is going to be with the club. But yeah, obviously, I think adding one more bat in some fashion would be really good, and maybe it's via trade. Like I think it makes perfect sense to consider, trading from our minor league depth, because at this point, the cool thing about all this is that in spite of us contending for basically the last 6 seasons plus, the Brewers have maintained a really strong minor league farm system. In fact, their farm system made big strides last year and moved from, I think, the bottom half of the league all the way into pretty consensus a top 10 farm system going into 2024. And part of the reason of that is because the Brewers have not, gone for it and given up a lot of good prospects at deadline trades like we've all as fans have wanted them to do. But the offshoot of that is that we still have a really strong minor league system. And then I think that we can, I think they should look to dip into that. But it also is probably the reason why they're comfortable not trading Burns or Adames right now and making it a run at, because I don't think that they necessarily feel that they are like other small market teams and entering a rebuild, so to speak, that they're in need and their farm system is not in desperate need of being restocked by trading those guys. So I think that's pretty cool that they've set themselves up that way. Obviously, if you've heard our podcast in the past, that's not what we were clamoring for. We have wanted some deeper postseason runs with some better quality bats brought in, but it is what it is now. And I think that we're set up pretty well for 2024 with a lot of different options on which way to go and who to trade and what to do. But it wouldn't surprise me now that the next move the Brewers make is to probably add some more starting pitching depth. Obviously, we're down Woodruff. We're down Adrian Hauser. Obviously, Wade Miley, Colin Ray are coming back along with Peralta and Burns. And we've got Robert Gasser about ready for major league innings. But I really feel that we need some more depth there. And it wouldn't be surprising if we brought in someone else. Obviously, Joe Ross is part of the equation right now, too. But I think we really need some more quality starting pitching depth. And maybe it is bringing back someone like Brandon Woodruff so he could help us out later in the season or whatever. But I don't know that's kind of a pipe dream. I think we need some more depth right from the get-go. And so there's a bunch of starting pitcher names still on the market. We could possibly trade for someone, but I'm not super comfortable going into 2024 season with our current starting rotation. I'll put it that way.
I totally agree with that assessment, Craig. I have gone on record here on this podcast and just in our conversations in pre-production meetings and whatnot as wanting to bring back Woodruff on a 2-year deal, but that's not really a 2024 move. That's a 2025 move and a maybe 2024 move. And my thinking on that is that you bring back Woodruff now, you get him cheaper on that second year. You still are, you're still possibly going to be able to use him in the second half. And, he could be back in July. He could be back in August. And he I think, has a much better likelihood of coming back in the postseason. So that, I think, is a worthwhile risk as well. Obviously, there's a relationship history there. There was an expression of interest from Woodruff as to a scenario like that. So my thinking on that is that you sign Woodruff and you go out and get somebody else. I don't know exactly who was available on the trade market. I was, pretty disappointed to see that the Yankees were able to pick up Marcus Stroman. I'm a big proponent of Marcus Stroman. I would have loved to see him on this team. That being said, that's no longer an option. I would guess that in our budget, a guy like Jordan Montgomery is probably the best available. I don't know. He made $10 million, I think, or so last year. I don't know. I'd be
he
open
had
to
a pretty good year for the Rangers, obviously propelling them in the World Series win. So I think his payday is coming. I think he's going to be given a longer contract, but the Brewers are willing to kind of dish out. So unfortunately, I'm not counting on him. But a couple of names, I think I threw out Michael Lorenzen as a possible option. I think that he's probably fits our budget of probably a short-term deal at roughly about $10 million a year. But again, he's got plenty of issues himself. Another, if we're looking for well, you look at who's going to be this year's Julio Teheran, because we always seem to sign like a pretty older, past his prime vet. Obviously, I'm not sure what Zach Greinke's plans are. Maybe he's planning on retiring, but I think the ship is probably sailed on him, along with guys like Madison Bumgarner might be just completely done. One name that kind of intrigues me, because I've heard he's such
we're not going to get Madison Bumgarner. He's not going to be a Brewer. I'm sorry.
I know that, absolutely. But one guy that kind of intrigues me that's still out there, I'll just throw it out, is Johnny Cueto. Unfortunately, he's going to be 38. He's had some down years, but I've heard, and again, this is just for depth, but I've heard that he's a great clubhouse guy and he's a great mentor to younger pitchers. And I feel with such a young rotation, even our top guys like Freddie Peralta are still somewhat green. I mean, those aren't cagey vets or anything like that. Even Burns. So I just think that this rotation, obviously Wade Miley probably definitely qualifies as a cagey old vet, but adding someone like him, I think would be wise. And not necessarily him, but someone similar to that, where we just need some more depth. I'm not expecting us to, land a quality arm with a multi-year contract at this point. I'm probably going to be someone like Cueto on a one-year deal. So there's not too many names left out there. I mean, there's other guys that have just major injury concerns that I'd probably steer away from, like Ryu, the former Blue Jay and Dodger pitcher, obviously is almost perennially injured. And then, Mike Clevenger, again, I think has got too many issues. And then there's not much left really out there. Corey Kluber, I think, is well past his prime as he's coming up on 38 too. But it wouldn't be surprising if it's someone along the lines of, Kluber or Cueto. Definitely don't want a mid-40s guy like Rich Hill. But yeah, so it's getting pretty, we'll see what we come about. But I really feel, especially with the uncertainty of like, Gasser and Ashby, I think would be a huge part of this rotation once he's healthy, and maybe he will be right from the get-go. But I still think we need the depth because there's too many unknowns. So we'll see what the Brewers can drum up. I hope that there's a pitching signing fairly soon, because I think pitchers and catchers report in just a couple of weeks, which is exciting.
It is exciting. Johnny Cueto, again, Scotty's intern's handing me some notes here. Johnny Cueto had a rough one last year, 1-4 record, only pitched in 13 games, posted an ERA over 6.02 and 52 in the third inning. So yeah, he had a rough one. Prior to that, though, 2022 and 25 games, he had a 3.35 ERA. So, a little bit better. That was his best ERA, though, in a number of years. 2018 was the only other time in the past 5 or 6 seasons that he's posted an ERA south of 4.08.
Yeah. So again, it could be anyone. That's just someone I just think highly of. But I mean, I'm obviously not running the Milwaukee Brewers. But speaking of running the Milwaukee Brewers, we've been run by former Tampa Ray front office guys, and David Stearns and Matt Arnold for the better part of the last 10 years or whatever. And all I have to say is their philosophy, and it was known, if you looked how they ran the Rays before this, they never put too much of stock and value in this corner infielders. They were like, oh, we're kind of a dime a dozen. There's plenty of those floating around free agency. You can just grab one, whatever. But I think that was kind of a mistake. And I really feel that if you look at last year's draft, where they drafted a bunch of third basemen, including Brock Wilken in the first round, and what they've done now by signing Rhys Hoskins, I think they finally realized that, you need some offensive production, especially in the power department, from those corner and field spots. It's great to have all this athleticism and other skills all over the rest of the diamond, but you can't just punt those positions and still have a quality offense. And the Brewers, even though they've been contending all these years with an unbelievable pitching staff, especially their bullpen and their top starters, they've just the run production, a consistent offensive production has just been lacking for many, many years. And it just sucks because I feel that if they would have had a even above average offense any of the last few years, they could have really made a serious run all the way to the World Series. And unfortunately, it just did not happen. So I'm really pretty excited about this year's offense, more so than any offense probably since 2018. So yeah, we shall see.
Yeah, definitely. And when the Brewers are contending midseason, when looking back at it, 2018, the Brewers got Moustakis at the deadline. There's always a chance that the Brewers will add, again at the deadline. I don't want to get our hopes up. Our deadline approach has been awful since then, but maybe there's been a little bit of wiggle room now given by ownership to go out and actually be a little bit more aggressive. I will say I'm a lot more optimistic after yesterday than I was 2 days ago. So I'm pretty excited about where things stand going into the year.
And it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, we're so many great outfielders, young outfielders, and with Christian Yelich not likely to move anytime soon, it really seems like a prospect for a prospect trade might make a lot of sense too. If we were to want to move like Joey Weimer for someone else's third base prospect or something like that, those trades very rarely happen. But I think the Brewers should consider it to help out the 2024 team and beyond, because I don't see a future third baseman that's anywhere near ready. I think if you're looking 5+ years from now, Brock Wilkin hopefully will be that guy. But Tyler Black.
About Tyler Black was just ranked by one of the MLB pipeline reports as being the top 5 third base prospects in all baseball, for sure. So yeah, I'm pretty stoked about Tyler Black. I don't know, maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah, no, and I think his bat will even play better at second base. That's why. And again, I don't really know how this is all going to play out, but my guess is that the 2025 Brewers will feature Bryce Trang at shortstop and Tyler Black at second. And we won't know who's at first and third going into next year, just like this, like always. But I could be wrong on that. Tyler Black could solidify himself as a third baseman, and he can play there, but he can also play second. His bat plays up even more at that position, obviously. So yeah, we'll see what the Brewers have in mind for any of these guys. And it's also nice, again, not to just brush them to the side or under the rug, but Andrew Monasterio definitely earned a role on the 2024 team with his play last year. And so it's always nice to have him as a backup option and kind of a super utility infielder. So excited to still have him on the team as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I nothing that I said before was to denigrate Monasterio whatsoever. It was just to say that I think that his best role is in that utility position. It's a role that not many guys can actually fulfill. So when you find a guy that can do it, there's a ton of value in that to me. So that was kind of my thinking on that.
Yep, absolutely. And we'll talk about this as we finish up. It's been a very cold stove season up until yesterday, and now the stove feels all of a sudden very hot. And not only that, with only a couple of weeks to pitchers and catchers reporting, or less than a month here, it's pretty exciting to get fired up about baseball at this point. And I don't know if you're a fan of the Milwaukee Brewers, you've got to be excited by this signing, and we obviously are. So welcome, Rhys Hoskins.
Yeah, and Craig, there was one other quick news item I wanted to bring up. I don't know if you saw this report yesterday that was reported, I think it was by Robert Murray, one of our colleagues, but he mentioned the Brewers were all in on Aroldis Chapman, which surprised me a little bit. Chapman ended up signing with the Pittsburgh Pirates. I'm not sure what it was that they offered that the Brewers could not, but apparently the Brewers were in on him. Now, what's interesting about that to me is that the Brewers are apparently looking at left-handed relievers. Chapman comes with his own issues, obviously on a personal level, and kind of glad he's not wearing a Milwaukee Brewers uniform, at least for my money. But I do think it's interesting that the Brewers are kind of kicking the tires, at least, on some left-handed relievers to pair with Hobie Milner. We saw the team acquire Andrew Chafin last year. His time in Milwaukee was cut short, probably just because of his performance issues after being acquired by Milwaukee, but it is interesting that the team still apparently thinks that we are in need of a left-handed reliever as well. So that may be another area to look for in the next couple of weeks that the Brewers may be wanting to upgrade going into the season.
That makes perfect sense. And I agree with you. Like, I don't know if we were a great fit for Chapman. I was kind of shocked, surprised. They signed a 1-year deal with the Pirates. And no offense to Pirates, but
Well,
I don't know
they're
why he'd
stocking
want to
up on
sign there because
deadline chips. That's why I signed with Kansas City last year. They'll trade him to whoever wins the World Series, I'm sure.
exactly. So I mean, I guess it's smart for the Pirates to have him in house, and then basically it's like a free prospect trade or something like that. But yeah. Anyway, yeah. So maybe they'll trade him to the Milwaukee Brewers. But again,
Well, hey, you never know. That could happen. That could happen. So maybe we don't want to denigrate him too much. But yeah, if his track record is anything, I think that he got traded by the Yankees to the Cubs in 2016, right before they won their whatever world championship. I know that last year he played with the Rangers when the Rangers won it. So it's happened a couple times during his career. So it is kind of interesting and sort of funny. I think he was traded to the Yankees down the stretch by the Reds as well originally, and had re-signed back there with them as well. But not during their world championship year, obviously, but just another season. But it's kind of interesting looking at Chapman's track record.
Yeah. And speaking of, Holby Miller being our only lefty currently slated for the bullpen, I mean, you got to look at depth there too, at least. And maybe the Hudson guy we got from the Dodgers is probably our AAA depth for our left-hander in case there's an injury to Milner. You can't have a major league bullpen, in my opinion, without at least one left-hander. And I think you actually need two or three of them, to be quite honest. And I just don't feel like the Brewers have had that. It seems like they've been fine having one or two at best for better part of the last decade or whatever. And I like more lefties than that in my bullpen. But yeah, so it wouldn't shock me that we're probably in the market for another lefty. And hopefully, they were kicking the can on like Zach Britton last year for depth, and he was injured himself. So hopefully they look for a healthy left-hander with some major league experience. And even though everyone loved Andrew Chafin in a Milwaukee Brewers uniform, he did not perform well for the team, so I do not expect us targeting him once again. But again, could be an option. But there's some other lefties out there, obviously, in the reliever market. I would be shocked if they didn't sign one more lefty reliever. And in my opinion, they could probably add another right-handed reliever to beefing up the bullpen as well. So we'll see going forward. So. All right.
Yeah, well, I think more than anything, it's just exciting that the Brewers are actually actively doing things again. It's been as you pointed out, a very cold, long, slow offseason, with the exception of losing our manager. We pretty much haven't done anything else, and so this has been exciting to see that there are some signs of life apparently in the Brewers front office. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about the fact that as much as I'm excited about him, that Eric Haas is not going to be our big offseason acquisition.
Yeah, exactly. Even though, yeah, welcome to the team, Eric.
Yeah, no, respectfully.
Now, we should talk about, it hasn't been just a cold stove offseason for just the Milwaukee Brewers. It seems like it's like a trend around baseball where a lot of these dominoes have not been falling. I know Josh Hader just signed with the Houston Astros last week, but for 5 years, $95 million. But overall, it's just been kind of a cold offseason. And I think that the reason for that is because of the whole Diamonds sports thing, where a lot of people's long-term TV stuff is kind of up in the air. I know Amazon Prime has stepped forward and has been borrowing the money or something. I don't know exactly all the specifics of that, but most likely once that stabilizes itself, maybe some more signings will happen. But I think this whole offseason is going to be because that instability is going to be, I think that this is not the best year to be out there as a free agent. I'll just put it that way. So the Brewers probably can maybe get some more bargains here toward the end of the season, and that's where we shine. So,
Yeah,
let's see how it plays out.
Yeah, that sounds great. That's one of the things that kind of, I was thinking about the Merrifield situation, just, adding a quality bat this late in the offseason for a relatively cheap price. I think he would just be a good addition to our infield mix, and that was kind of my thinking on that. But we'll see. Yeah, well, we've definitely got a few areas that we could stand to improve on. I do think we need some more starting pitching depth, as we discussed. Probably another bullpen arm. So yeah, hopefully it will be an eventful and interesting couple of weeks here, prior to going into spring training.
And one more interesting thing to point out, a little tidbit before we leave you, Brewer fans and Brewer Crew Review fans, is that before this Hoskins signings, the Brewers 2024 starting lineup featured as many, or was set to feature as many starting players over the age of 30 as there were under the age of 20. being Jackson Trio, who's not yet
Wow.
20, assuming he's going to start at the major league level. And Christian Yelich was the only player over the age of 30 at 32 years old for the Brewers in their starting lineup, which is still exciting, to have such a young team, especially a lot of them just entering their prime or yet to hit it. But signing someone like Hoskins, who's going to enter the season at the age of 30, I think was a big move for many reasons for a young team, and I think he's a perfect fit, and we shall see.
Yeah, that sounds great, Craig. Yeah, it's pretty exciting. It's kind of a weird mix, but then again, it always is in Milwaukee, it seems like. And my guess is that Christian Yelich is probably going to be the DH to start the year. Speaking of Christian Yelich, that was just another thing that I know we were talking a little bit about previously. But yeah, it's good to see this mix hopefully coming together. I think that Hoskins is definitely a good ingredient for that. So very, very pumped up today, and hopefully we're going to continue to be pumped up here in the next couple of weeks as we head into spring training.
Awesome. Well, thanks for tuning in, Brewer fans, and stay classy, Scott Bortel, and go Brewers.
Yeah, stay classy, Wisconsin. Go Brewers.